I don't know how well this will work out or not work. I'm a little stunned or dazed right now. Um, Someone just presented a really heavy, deep, and neat experience that he had in the comments in one of my videos. And it's very deep. And it's just got me pondering. We really don't know anything. And the biggest thing we don't know is who and what we are. One thing many of us know for sure at this point is we're not limited to the body. The body is something we use, like the mind, but it isn't who and what we are. And anyone that's had a reincarnation memory will probably be more comfortable with that because we've had many, many bodies. And so if we're to say that I am this body, then I am equally all those other bodies. And the conscious mind here and now doesn't generally have access to that. I'm wondering, though, how far away from thingness can we get? Things appear. I mean, we don't even know what things are. Remember, atoms are empty. All of my solid substance of this body fits in a thimble, and there's room for yours in there too. And so one thing we know, if we've looked into any of these types of things, is that we don't know even what matter is. We don't know anything. We know how things appear, but we have enough evidence that establishes that the appearances are illusions or illusory. And so we don't know what we are. We don't know what things are. We really don't know anything. And yet we're so full of our own knowledge, our own knowing. I think we get filled up with that like a balloon until the balloon is popped. It has a skin that isolates it from everything else that is. And it's full of its own illusion. To think that one knows something is a mistake. But more than that, it just gets in the way of exploration because it sets up limits. The mind, whatever else it does, is very good at weeding out that which doesn't go with its beliefs, its paradigm of what is and what isn't. I've had a great deal of enjoyment, and there's a lot of life flowing through changing perspectives, looking at things from different angles. In the Peter Russell lecture that I've recently recommended that I put in a playlist on my YouTube site, he presents things from the perspective of consciousness, and then he changes perspective on us, and he's talking about light, and he takes it from the perspective of light. Einstein used to play with things this way. If he was riding a light beam and another light beam went by, you can play around this way and have complete and total and joyful freedom to do this. And he presents that from the perspective of light, it doesn't travel anywhere. No, I can't do that for you. You need to go watch the lecture. It's called The Primacy of Consciousness. I highly recommend it. It will pretzel your mind. And that's one of my favorite things. I want my mind pretzeled all the time, because when it gets pretzeled, what's happened is it's come up against some of its barriers. And that's why it gets stunned and stupefied. And that's a very good thing, because that means another barrier is on its way out. It's in the midst of the process of being discovered. And, you know, a mind is a great thing to have, I'll admit. You won't hear me argue against having one. But this pondering that I do is from the heart. Very much so. You can go that much further from heart. You can go into realms that mind would simply be terrified to enter, because mind is the one that's got all the lockdowns and all the structures and all the thingness. Mind correlates very well with thingness. Mind could well be the creator of thingness. Thought creates. Thought manifests. It's just that we look at these things that are manifesting and we really don't know what they are. But you know what? They behave based on our beliefs about them. Did you know there, I couldn't tell you where it is, but there's a tribe of people somewhere that there's a certain color that they don't see. It just doesn't appear for them. This is how hypnosis works. Things aren't what we think they are, and to my way of thinking, it is best to give up the idea that we know anything at all about anything, including things. Matter is energy at a slow rate of vibration. Now, that's not what your senses pick up. And one of our big mistakes has been relying on the senses and believing in the evidence that they present, that that's telling us something. And in fact, one of the most accurate things or perspectives, in my opinion, is that there's really no world out there at all, that all of it exists inside the head, if you will, in the brain. I don't know. David Icke did a good job with this. And you could actually see the picture of the man sitting there, and then inside of his head was the man sitting there. And everything that's perceived, it's like a computer program, you know. It's translating energetic signals into apparent realities, but they're about as real as the race car driving computer program that you play, or whatever. I don't like the violent ones. They desensitize. Anything that desensitizes, I think, should be throwing up red flags everywhere. But people aren't alert to it because they are desensitized by the media. By television and the movies, we become completely desensitized to many, many things. Commercialism among them. And so we're no longer really able to judge, because in 3D everything is relative. And these things, it's all planned out to come upon us incrementally. It grows by incrementalism. And so when, let's say, this year there's 5 more seconds of commercials than there were last year, and maybe they throw in a small dose of some kind of government announcement, something or another, you know, some I'm incoherent. I'm trying here, guys. I'm trying. But when it comes on you by bits and small pieces, who is it that's going to make a fool of himself and say, that 5 seconds, you've got to roll that back. That's, that's an encroachment upon my freedom to not be disturbed in my home. And yet, so what happens then is you look back 20 years and you see how much program did you get and how much commercial did you get and how much that was news and that kind of thing. And you have to look over the greater span of time in order to see what's been done here, and what's been done here is obscene. But it happened because it was incremental. The totalitarian tiptoe, as David Icke calls it. Of course, he's putting intent behind that. But it's to take over control, and it's to numb and dumb the people down so that they won't object, so they won't even notice. That's their ideal, is that we'll be controlled, but we won't notice. We're harder to control when the bars of our prison are obvious. But when they're invisible and they grow on us incrementally, as everything does, I mean, it's all planned out that way, my friends. And due to the way that we've been thinking and just the whole framework of our thoughts, I'm thinking, and just everything, it's all very cagey and very craftily that we've been led to the mess that we're in now, and made to believe that it's all our fault, that we're the bad guys. See, we're being manipulated and engineered into that as well. That's just another way. Or that there's this group or that group that's the bad guys, A major part of it all is to turn us against one another. And in the midst of the squabbling that ensues, we don't see them. And so we're being played. We're the patsy, we're the fool in the piece, or we have been up to now. And I'm afraid there's a whole lot of people. See, the whole thing is so big. And there have been things done, such as there is now a permanent association of the word conspiracy with the word theory so as to weaken it. And so anytime you bring anything like this up, the idea is that you're the fool. And it's your brethren that are going to laugh at you and point fingers at you and tell you to shut up, that you're a kook. And it's so huge that the whole thing, and how much wrongness we currently believe, that it's almost too great a divide for a lot of people to cross from their current everyday consciousness into approaching much more of what simply is. And I say that because I'm a person who has played with perspective my whole entire life. I have a prejudice, a very strong prejudice, which instead of being against something is in favor of something, and that's anything foreign. And the whole idea behind it was, I want different ways to view things. And you get something that's far more different when you get someone from a completely different culture. And so it's been my joy to study things that way, different accents, different ways of speaking, much less all the other differences. And I have found great joy throughout my life. I have very mobile perspective. It's relatively easy for me to see things from vastly different angles and to see both sides of things. Now, I think that's happening to all of us, for all of us, in the energy intensity, as the frequencies and the intensity of the energy is rising. We are coming up out of 3D. Now, what that means, I don't know. I'm ready to say I don't even know what 3D is. You know, length, width, and depth. What does that mean? What does it mean? If we don't even know what something is, I mean, if all of the substance in my body fits in a thimble, how can I evaluate what 3D is? You really can't, you know? And so I was just sitting here. So mind, it's not mind numbed, just stunned, um, trying to work through some of this. And I thought I'd find out what would happen if I just turned the camera on, you know, did the journal thing. That often helps quite a bit. But this is really huge that I'm messing with right now, and I'm still contemplating getting rid of the whole concept of thingness, of thinking that there are things. I seem to think that I hold this crystal in my hand, and you know, at this point, the whole concept is flawed. What's the crystal? This is what appears to be, and it's manipulable by the dexterity of the hand. But what's a hand? What's a crystal? What's a thing? What's a mind? If it's thought that creates, and if it's thought that creates limits, this much I know, because as I've gotten rid of my beliefs in limits, I'm subsequently able to experience extra increments of freedom. And so, you know, that's something that a person can test for themselves. You have to be reasonably observant to be able to begin to see what your beliefs are, because they're stored pretty much in the subconscious, maybe the unconscious. I'm not really sure about the distinction between those two. They're just not, you know, accessible normally to the conscious awareness. That has to be set aside in order for the therapeutic hypnotist to get in. And then all of a sudden we find that we all have these photographic memories. It's just stored somewhere where the conscious mind doesn't access it. You know, what is all of this? And they keep us in an electronic pea soup of radiation, vibration, and frequency that is so chaotic. You talk about dissociating you from you. And you better believe that all of this stuff is designed to keep us out of whack. They want us to be manipulable, controllable, manageable, the herd. And, you know, I'm not really interested right now in any kind of, or ever, in any kind of pointing fingers. Who and what's behind it, I mean, I just want to understand it. All of that can come later. You know, mostly things sort themselves out, but you have to start where you are, and I think you have to start at the most basic level, because if your foundation isn't good, then whatever you build on top of it is going to come crashing down. And so, more fundamentally, I think it's on us to find out what is. What is reality? You know? As we get rid of false beliefs, we gain the freedom of movement that was controlled by the beliefs that we had. Most everything we've been taught is a lie. And it's not the little guys doing the lying. The little guys, you and me, we're just the herd, okay? And those of us doing the lying for the most part are manipulated into that. People, be kind to yourself and to one another. Let's all recognize and realize that we do the best we can. Let's give everybody credit for that. People do the best they can under whatever circumstances they perceive that they find themselves in. And so peaceful non-compliance is a good thing to remember. No matter what, how about we refuse to turn against one another for any reason? Sure, we can correct one another, like this thing with Keisha Crowther. We can set the record straight and say, hey, this isn't right. We need you to make an adjustment here and come clean on this. And that's fine. That's very difficult. And there are those that are under the thumb of those who control us, who are, there are people that would like to tear her apart. And they're being manipulated and going along with it without realizing. I really think it's very important in getting along with your fellow man to give him the benefit of the doubt pretty much every time. Now your heart is going to guide you. I think that's the one point of sanity. That's the thing that gives me the strength to do this, folks. When you find and have a solid base and foundation in the heart, nothing scares you. Nothing. Nothing. And so it's not even like a courage. It's just a place where there is no fear. I don't care if all the monsters that ever existed anywhere appear in my living room, and have my body for lunch. This is not a big deal. There's nothing that's a big deal to who and what you really are. These are props. These bodies, they're props in the play. They're not solid. So if something rips my arm off and it's bleeding and it's a gory mess and so on, what's real there? Those atoms are empty space. So that's one great big theatrical illusion, isn't it? It makes you wonder how our senses, what kind of intent was involved in getting them to perceive in the limited way that they do. We have the electromagnetic spectrum that we can look at, and it's pretty huge. And then when you look at the little tiny slice of it, that's the visible spectrum, it makes you wonder, because everybody knows if you have dogs and cats, they see more than you do. They see more frequencies that are invisible to human eyes. Now, why the heck is that? If you listen to Credo Mutwa, who's an African shaman isn't the right word, but it's handy, because you know what that means. And he's in his 80s and has received initiation into all of the mysteries that are available where he is. He's in the Zulu. Is it a tribe? I guess. And he says that in their history, see, they went underground with their knowledge, and they didn't lose it all. They kept it secret. A lot of the native peoples have done this, and they kept it close to the chest, and they kept it quiet for thousands of years, for centuries, and it was just passed one to one to one in secret. He says back in the day, the ones that are running the show here, the aliens, if you will, were visible. And they walked among us. Remember, it says in the Bible, Adam and Eve walked in the garden with God. And man could see them. Man was not permitted to draw accurate representations of them. These are the reptilians that we're talking about here. They're bipedal reptiles. You know, they look like kind of like a man, except they're in shape, but their head is reptile-ish, and their skin and all of that is what you'd find on a reptile. And there were things that were done to people. These guys are masters of DNA manipulation. Apparently, the wealth in the galaxy, the universe, is DNA. Different forms of life. That's the cash crop, if you will. And so there's a lot of hybridizing and cloning and different things that go on. But a man used to be able to see those beings. And then there was manipulation that was done, after which they could no longer be seen. And so you'll hear me frequently comment, this room isn't empty. The room where you are, it's not empty. It never is. We don't see things that the mankind of Earth once used to be able to see. We don't see things that our cats and dogs can see. And it's because of these kinds of manipulation. Well, let me tell you something. We're not limited to these bodies. That's not who and what we are. We're something far greater than that. We use the bodies to work with and through, but it's not us. And we have powers and abilities that we know not of in the conscious mind to change things, to be the way that we want them to be. And they've got us all focused on a Maserati or a Ferrari or a fancy home in the Riviera or whatever. You know, they've really got us so commercialized and messed up that our whole sense of values is suspect. And until we pull back and isolate, I'm going to say for at least 30 days from the media, and then go back and have a look at it again. If you can do a 30-day fast from that television, and then you go look at it again, you will be shocked. You will. And don't do the radio either, because you're being mind numbed by what comes over it. Right now you think it's normal. Well, that's a lie. It's not normal. There's nothing normal about it. It's programming, pure and simple. And until you're willing to give it a rest, you're not going to know. And no one can convince you because you're in a mind-numbed state. But it wears off, you know. That's the kind of programming that has to be renewed and resumed day in, day out, all the time, or it quickly wears off. And so we're just going about empowering ourselves. And there are small ways and there are great ways. You might think it's a small way to turn off the television for a month. It turns out it's a great way, though. And I would also suggest, if you've got what it takes, if you're the adventurous sort, turn off the cell phone. You know, turn off everything electronic that you can possibly do without. It's okay to have a cell phone. You don't need to carry it around with you. You don't need to have it every minute. Nobody has any peace anymore. That's also a part of it. I mean, people don't even take a walk in the park without a cell phone. Now, that's obscene and it's stupid and it's absurd, but nobody thinks of that, you know, because they're programmed. What does a cell phone have to do with a walk in the park? We don't even walk in the park. We're not even there, you know? And so, but these things begin to come into focus once you get away from the constant programming and reprogramming that's being done by the media. And then things like I'm doing right here, right now, are a lot easier and they're a lot more fun. I'll be interested in the comments from this one. And I'm going to be interested too to figure out what on earth to call it. Good day and God bless.